It was a beautiful, sunny morning on the day of their 5th wedding anniversary. Mark had woken up early, filled with excitement and love for his wife, Sarah. The past 5 years had been a journey of ups and downs, but Mark believed that they had weathered every storm together. To celebrate their milestone, he had been planning a surprise anniversary party for weeks, a grand gesture to show Sarah how much she meant to him. As he moved around the house, making final preparations, Mark couldn't help but smile at the thought of her reaction. He had arranged for all of their closest friends and family to gather at a fancy restaurant later that evening, where he would surprise her with a romantic speech and a beautiful piece of jewelry he had picked out months ago. Everything was set to be perfect. In the midst of his preparations, Mark realized he needed Sarah's phone to coordinate the timing of the surprise with her best friend, who was helping him with the arrangements. He found her phone on the kitchen counter, unlocked, and quickly opened the messaging app to find the contact he needed. As he scrolled through, something unusual caught his eye, an unfamiliar name at the top of her recent conversations. Curiosity piqued, Mark tapped on the chat, expecting to see a harmless conversation. Instead, what he found made his heart sink. The messages were intimate, filled with words of affection, and laced with plans to meet up later that week. As he scrolled further, it became clear that this wasn't just a one-time fling, it was an ongoing affair. The reality hit him like a ton of bricks. His wife, the woman he had loved and trusted, was betraying him. For a moment, Mark stood frozen, his mind reeling from the shock and betrayal. His first instinct was to confront Sarah immediately, to demand answers, but something inside him stopped. As the initial wave of anger and hurt subsided, a cold, calculated clarity took its place. He realized that an immediate confrontation would only lead to denials, excuses, or tears, none of which would give him the justice he sought. No, if Sarah wanted to betray him in secret, he would expose her infidelity in the most public and humiliating way possible. Mark decided then and there that the anniversary party, originally planned as a celebration of their love, would instead become the stage for his revenge. He would let Sarah believe everything was normal, that she had gotten away with it, right up until the moment he revealed the truth in front of everyone they knew. As Mark continued his preparations for the evening, there was a new determination in his actions. The party would still go on, but it would be a celebration of his liberation from deceit rather than of their marriage. And by the end of the night, Sarah would regret ever thinking she could fool him. With his mind made up, Mark set about finalizing the details of the anniversary party. Every step was now laced with a cold, deliberate intent. The restaurant was already booked, the menu selected, and the decorations ordered. But now Mark added a twist to the evening's plans. Instead of simply celebrating, this would be a night Sarah would never forget, for all the wrong reasons. Mark's first task was to gather solid evidence of Sarah's infidelity. Returning to the kitchen, he took Sarah's phone again, this time carefully screenshotting the incriminating messages. Every affectionate word, every intimate plan between Sarah and her lover was documented. He emailed the screenshots to himself, ensuring that he had multiple backups in case she tried to delete them later. He even found a few suggestive photos they had exchanged and added those to his growing collection of damning evidence. Mark knew that revealing the affair wouldn't be enough. It needed to be undeniable and unforgettable. He decided to prepare a special presentation that would make it impossible for Sarah to deny her betrayal. But first, he had to make sure all the key players were in place. The guest list for the party was already extensive, including family, close friends, and even a few colleagues. Mark now reviewed the list with a new perspective, making sure that everyone who mattered to Sarah would be present. He wanted the humiliation to be as public and as devastating as possible. As he made the final calls to confirm the guests, Mark carefully added one more name to the list: Sarah's lover. He sent the man an anonymous message, pretending to be Sarah, inviting him to the party under the guise of a surprise celebration. The lover, oblivious to Mark's knowledge and Sarah's deceit, eagerly accepted the invitation, not realizing he was walking into a trap. With the guest list confirmed, Mark could barely contain his anticipation. The stage was set, and the players were in place. All that remained was the final touch, the reveal. Over the next few hours, Mark meticulously crafted the presentation that would expose Sarah's affair. He compiled the screenshots and photos into a slideshow, ensuring that each piece of evidence was displayed in a sequence that would tell the full story of her betrayal. The images would appear one by one, each more incriminating than the last, leading up to the final, undeniable proof. To accompany the slideshow, Mark wrote a speech. It started out like any loving husband's toast, recounting the happy moments of their marriage, the memories they had shared, and the life they had built together. But as the speech progressed, it would take a dark turn, slowly revealing the truth to the unsuspecting guests. The tension would build with each word, culminating in the moment when the first slide appeared on the screen behind him. Mark rehearsed the speech in his mind, imagining the look on Sarah's face when she realized what was happening. He pictured the shock, the horror, and the humiliation she would feel as everyone they knew saw her for what she truly was. The thought gave him a grim satisfaction, fueling his determination to see it through. As the day drew to a close and the time for the party approached, Mark felt a strange sense of calm. He had been betrayed in the worst way possible, but now he had the power to turn that betrayal into something else, something that would give him the justice he deserved. Tonight, he would reclaim his dignity, and Sarah would face the consequences of her actions. The evening of the anniversary party arrived, and the restaurant buzzed with excitement. The private room Mark had reserved was beautifully decorated, filled with flowers, candles, and photos from their 5 years of marriage. Friends and family chatted happily, toasting to what they believed was a celebration of love and commitment. Sarah, dressed in a stunning outfit Mark had gifted her, was the picture of joy, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break. Mark played the role of the doting husband perfectly. He greeted guests with a smile, exchanged pleasantries, and even shared a few laughs. As he moved through the crowd, he noticed Sarah stealing glances at her phone, likely coordinating with her lover who had yet to arrive. Mark's heart hardened with every glance she took, but he kept his emotions in check, knowing that the moment of truth was drawing near. Finally, Sarah's lover arrived. He entered the room with a casual confidence, unaware that he was walking into a trap. Sarah's eyes lit up when she saw him, but she quickly masked her reaction, blending back into the crowd. Mark watched the exchange with a calm detachment, knowing that the tables would soon turn. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere was one of happiness and celebration. Guests clinked glasses, shared stories, and showered Sarah and Mark with well wishes. Sarah's laughter filled the room, her happiness seeming genuine. Little did she know that this joy would be short-lived. As the night reached its peak, Mark knew it was time. He gently tapped a glass with a spoon, the traditional signal that a speech was about to be made. The room quieted down and all eyes turned to him. Sarah smiled at him warmly, expecting a loving tribute, unaware that this would be a speech she would never forget. Mark began his speech with heartfelt words, recounting their journey together. He spoke of their early days, the struggles they had overcome, and the love he believed they had shared. His voice was steady and his expression sincere, as if he truly meant every word. But as he continued, a subtle shift occurred in his tone. The warmth faded, replaced by a cold edge. Mark's words became more pointed, more direct, as he began to describe a love that had been betrayed, a trust that had been shattered. The guests started to exchange confused glances, sensing that something was off. And then, with a calmness that belied the gravity of what he was about to do, Mark pulled out a remote control and pointed it at the projector. The first slide appeared on the screen behind him, an image of a message Sarah had sent to her lover, filled with words of affection and promises of their next meeting. A shocked silence fell over the room. Sarah's smile froze, her face turning pale as she stared at the screen in disbelief. She glanced around as if hoping this was some sort of cruel joke, but the growing murmur of the crowd told her otherwise. Mark continued speaking, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. 5 years ago, I stood before many of you and promised to love and honor Sarah for the rest of my life. I thought she made the same promise to me, Mark said, his voice steady but laced with bitterness. But tonight, I'm here to reveal the truth about what my wife has been doing behind my back. The slides continued, each one more damning than the last. The intimate messages, the suggestive photos, everything was laid bare for all to see. The guests looked on in stunned silence, some turning away in discomfort, others watching with morbid fascination. Sarah, her eyes wide with horror, tried to speak, but no words came out. She was utterly paralyzed, trapped in a nightmare of her own making. As the final slide appeared, Mark paused, letting the full weight of the revelation sink in. The room was heavy with tension, the air thick with shock and disbelief. Mark then turned his gaze to Sarah, who was on the verge of tears, and finally to her lover, who stood frozen in the corner, his face drained of color. "And now," Mark said, his voice calm but firm, "I would like to introduce you all to the man who helped my wife betray me. Please don't be shy. Come up here and join us." The lover, now the focus of the room's attention, looked as if he wanted to disappear. He hesitated, glancing at Sarah, but Mark's eyes bore into him, leaving him with no choice. Slowly, he stepped forward, his head hanging in shame. The confrontation was brutal in its simplicity. Mark didn't need to raise his voice or make any threats. The evidence spoke for itself. The room was suffocatingly silent as Sarah's lover stood next to her, both of them exposed for what they truly were. The humiliation was complete. Mark took a deep breath and looked around the room, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his friends, family, and acquaintances. "I think we can all agree," he said quietly, "that this marriage is over." With that, he put down the microphone and walked out of the room, leaving Sarah and her lover standing there, surrounded by the ruins of their deception. The guests remained frozen in place, too stunned to react, as Mark made his way to the door. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing. Mark felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, but most of all, a sense of closure. He had done what he needed to do, and now he was free. As Mark walked out of the room, the stunned silence among the guests slowly dissolved into a cacophony of whispers, gasps, and murmurs of disbelief. The room, which had been filled with laughter and celebration moments ago, now buzzed with a mixture of shock, disgust, and pity. Some guests instinctively moved toward Sarah, offering awkward, half-hearted attempts at comfort. They placed their hands on her shoulders or whispered empty reassurances, but their expressions betrayed their true feelings, sympathy tainted with judgment. They couldn't reconcile the image of the woman they thought they knew with the one Mark had just exposed. Others turned to each other, exchanging looks of outrage and confusion. Conversations buzzed with fragments of disbelief. "I can't believe she did that to him. How could she? And he deserved better." A few of Mark's close friends and family members, visibly angry, voiced their support for him, their words sharp and condemning of Sarah's actions. It was clear that in the court of public opinion, Sarah had already been found guilty. Sarah stood in the center of the room, her legs trembling, feeling as though the ground was slipping away beneath her. Her mind was spinning, trying to grasp what had just happened. The reality of her situation crashed over her in waves. First, the shock of Mark's revelation, then the shame of being exposed, and finally, the crushing realization that she had lost everything. She tried to speak, her voice shaky and desperate. "Please listen to me. I can explain. It's not what it looks like," she stammered, but the words rang hollow. The evidence had been clear, the betrayal undeniable. Every pair of eyes in the room was on her, and none of them looked forgiving. Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached out, seeking sympathy from those around her, but no one could meet her gaze. Even her lover, who had stood beside her moments ago, now seemed distant, ashamed and unwilling to face the consequences of their actions. Sarah's attempts to justify herself only deepened her humiliation, as each word seemed to dig her deeper into a pit she couldn't escape from. Finally, overwhelmed by the weight of her disgrace, Sarah collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Her sobs filled the room, a pitiful sound that contrasted sharply with the festive atmosphere that had existed only minutes before. But there was no solace for her, no escape from the public shaming she now endured. As the scene unfolded inside the restaurant, Mark stood just outside the door, taking a moment to collect himself. He knew that what he had done was extreme, but it was also necessary. He had given Sarah everything, and in return, she had shattered his trust. Now, he had taken back control of his life, and with it, a sense of justice. With a deep breath, Mark re-entered the room, where all eyes turned back to him. The guests fell silent once more, waiting to see what he would do next. Sarah looked up at him through tear-streaked eyes, silently pleading for mercy, but Mark's expression was resolute. "This marriage," Mark began, his voice calm and steady, "is over. I loved you, Sarah. I trusted you. But you chose to betray me, and now you have to live with the consequences of that choice." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "I hope you learned something from this. I hope you realize what you've lost." The room was tense, the weight of the finality in his words palpable. Mark then turned to the guests, his tone softening just slightly. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I know this isn't the anniversary celebration any of us expected, but I appreciate your support." With that, he motioned to a woman standing near the entrance, a strikingly beautiful woman who had been quietly observing the events of the evening. She stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. As she approached Mark, he took her hand and smiled, the first genuine smile he had worn all night. "This," Mark said, turning to the room with the woman by his side, "is Emily. She's been a friend of mine for a long time, and she's helped me through this difficult time. We've recently started seeing each other, and I'm happy to say that she's going to be a big part of my life moving forward." The revelation was like a final nail in the coffin of Sarah's dignity. The guests, already reeling from the earlier shock, now saw the full extent of Mark's resolve. Not only had he exposed the betrayal, but he had also already moved on, leaving Sarah behind in every sense. As Mark and Emily turned to leave, the room was filled with a mixture of stunned silence and whispered conversations. Mark didn't look back. He didn't need to. The chapter of his life with Sarah was closed, and as he stepped out into the night with Emily by his side, he felt the weight of betrayal lift from his shoulders. He was ready to start anew, free from the deceit that had once clouded his life. As Mark walked away from the restaurant with Emily by his side, a profound sense of closure washed over him. The night had been a whirlwind of emotions, anger, hurt, and betrayal. But now, in the aftermath of his carefully orchestrated revenge, he felt an unexpected calm. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders, one that he hadn't fully realized he was carrying until it was gone. For weeks, Mark had struggled with the knowledge of Sarah's infidelity, feeling trapped in a web of deceit that he hadn't woven. But tonight, he had cut those ties in the most definitive way possible. There was a satisfaction in knowing that he had taken control of his own narrative, that he hadn't allowed himself to be a victim of her betrayal. Instead, he had exposed the truth, reclaimed his dignity, and made it clear to everyone, including himself, that he would not tolerate such dishonesty. As he and Emily walked into the cool night air, Mark found himself smiling, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He had made it through the storm, and now he was ready to embrace whatever the future held. Back at the restaurant, Sarah was left to face the fallout of the evening's events. Her world had crumbled in a matter of minutes, and the reality of her situation was beginning to set in. The guests, who had once been friends and family, now looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. Whispers and stares followed her every move, and she knew that her life would never be the same. In the days that followed, Sarah's life became a shadow of what it had been. Word of the public humiliation spread quickly, and soon, everyone in their social circle knew about her betrayal. She lost friends, faced judgment from her family, and even her job became a source of tension as colleagues learned about the scandal. The affair that had once brought her excitement now seemed like a distant nightmare, one that had cost her everything she held dear. But perhaps the most painful consequence for Sarah was the knowledge that Mark had already moved on. The image of him leaving the party with Emily haunted her, a constant reminder of what she had lost. The man who had once loved her, who had planned a celebration of their marriage, was now gone, replaced by a stranger who had no place for her in his life. For Mark, the end of his marriage marked the beginning of a new chapter. As the days passed, he found that the anger and resentment he had once felt toward Sarah gradually faded, replaced by a sense of peace. He no longer dwelled on the betrayal, no longer replayed the events in his mind. Instead, he focused on the future, a future that was his to shape, free from the shadows of deceit. Emily became a significant part of that future. Their relationship, which had begun as a friendship, quickly deepened into something more meaningful. She had been there for him during his darkest moments, offering support without judgment, and now, Mark found himself genuinely happy in her company. Together, they explored new possibilities, each day bringing them closer. As Mark looked forward to the days ahead, he felt a renewed sense of hope. He had faced the worst and come out stronger, and now he was ready to embrace whatever life had in store. The sweet taste of revenge had been satisfying, but what mattered more was the new beginning it had allowed him. With Emily by his side and the past firmly behind him, Mark knew that the best was yet to come. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, revenge, and new beginnings, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story from Only Stories About Men. We're here to share the tales of men who've faced the worst and come out stronger. Join our community and let's explore more incredible journeys together. See you in the next story.